This is Joe back with another video. I thought I'd do things a little different this time and just do a few circuits around the airport in a Cessna 172. Please enjoy. Alrighty, we're back in the Cessna 172 at Conway, Arkansas. Thought we'd go over the startup sequence and do a few circuits around the airport. First thing is you want to make sure the control locks are removed and the controls move freely and correct. Rudder pedals. Make sure the elevator and ailerons are moving in the right direction. And of course, in the simulator, they're always going to be working correctly, but even the controls I have, sometimes if it's not set up right, it won't work right. So even on a simulator, it's good just to make sure your controls are functioning properly, your peripherals. Go ahead and remove one of the yokes so I can see what I'm doing. We'll flip on the battery and alternator. Turn these lights off, we don't need them. Turn off the glare shield light, pedestal light. We'll leave the radio lights on. We'll flip on the nav. That lets people around us know that someone's in the airplane with the power on. First thing we'll do is push the brakes in and set the parking brake. Fuel selector onto both. Fuel shutoff valve to open or on. We'll go ahead and flip on the beacon because we're getting ready to start the aircraft. Anytime the engine is about to run or is running, the beacon should be on to let everybody know that the aircraft is running or operating. The landing light and taxi light will leave off for now till we get moving. The strobe light you would leave off until you turn on to the runway. And the pitot heat will leave off for now. We'll push the mixture full rich, throttle full forward, flip on the fuel pump. The fuel flow comes up. Turn the pump back off, pull the throttle back, open it just a hair to right magneto, left magneto, both, and then start. Immediately, the first thing you would look at is oil pressure. Make sure that it's up. As the engine warms up, it'll get a little bit higher. It'll get into the green arc. The oil temperature will come up. Make sure the battery's charging. Vacuum pump's working for the pneumatic instruments. And then we'll go ahead and flip on bus 1 and 2 for the avionics. Turn on the transponder. We'll let the GPS will pick up all the signals. And kind of Push the throttle in just a little bit to get the engine to idle about 1,000 RPMs, so it'll warm up. While those are aligning, we can you would go ahead and set your altimeter to the current barometric pressure. You'd go ahead and align your heading indicator with your compass. Of course, this is done automatically in the simulator anyways. We'll go ahead and hop down here to the trim wheel, set the trim for takeoff, which should be right there on that arrow in the simulator. For the Cessna, I usually put it right below the arrow. The runway's long enough, we'll probably just leave the flaps up for a flap up takeoff. We'll go ahead and adjust the heading bug to for the runway we're going to use.
Kilo Charlie X-Ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor is taxiing to runway 4.
Runway 4 is down that way, so we'll taxi out that way. We'll flip on the taxi light, and we'll leave the pitot heat off and the transponder on standby till we get towards the runway. Hold the brakes down, release the parking brake. Look left, look right. Make sure the coast is clear, except for this guy, he's always in the way. Test the brakes, make sure it stops. As you're turning, keep an eye on the heading indicator. Make sure that it swings left and right and functions properly, along with the turn coordinator over here. And the simulator has a checklist you can use for most of the airplanes. You can just go down the checklist and make sure you're doing everything properly, but I'm just sort of winging it. If you're flying in real life, this is probably a really bad habit to get into. I haven't flown in a long time, and I probably won't ever fly a real aircraft ever again due to health issues, but in the simulator, I only use the checklist as much as I need it. For proper takeoff and everything. A lot of the checklist is for safety purposes and making sure you don't forget things. It's really not super critical in a game. But if you're using this for practicing or in flight training, practicing at home, outside of the real cockpit, you want to keep using your checklist so it becomes like muscle memory to use it. But if you're just a gamer doing this for fun, you can use the checklist or not. It doesn't really matter. Once you kind of remember how to operate the aircraft, especially for a simple aircraft, everything kind of, the checklist kind of becomes redundant. But it's pretty useful for like airliners because there's so many systems and switches and things that have to be turned on in the proper order just for the flight to start. So I still use a checklist pretty closely for like the Boeing 737 and more advanced aircraft, Cessna Citation and such. But for these little ones, I tend to just wing it. And now that we're out here at the runway, I guess we can go ahead and do an engine run up. Check the magnetos. Again, that's something for safety. It's not something that's going to break in the simulator, but we'll go ahead and do it just to show you. We'll hold the brakes down, pull the parking brake. For the Cessna 172, you'll bring the RPMs up to about 1800 to 2000. About 1800 is good. And we'll come over here and we'll go to the first notch to the left. That'll be the left magneto. It's got two magnetos firing for the spark plugs. Left one first. The RPMs will drop between 50 and 100. They shouldn't drop any more than 150. If they do, there's something wrong. If the engine starts rumbling and running rough, then there's something wrong and you need to take the aircraft back to the hangar, figure out what the problem is. But you go to the left magneto, it's good. You go back to both, let it clear up, let the RPMs come back up, and then go two notches to the left and go to the right magneto. 1, 2. Same thing, 50 to 100 RPM drop, no more than 150. Make sure the engine still runs smooth, and then go back to both. And that's good. If we had a constant speed propeller with a propeller knob, we'd cycle that, make sure it's working properly. I also like to quickly cut the mixture all the way off and then advance it rich again real fast just to make sure that it functions properly. But you don't want to hold it and cut off for too long because that would just shut the engine off. So you just see it drops. It's good. For these smaller, less powerful aircraft, you can actually, if the area is behind you clear, you can actually go full power, make sure that it's making the horsepower that it should. Static RPM, sitting still, the max, the RPM should be between 24 and 2500. It's producing good enough power, and then pull it back to idle. We're out here at the runway. We'll go ahead and flip on the landing light, the strobe light, the pitot heat, and turn the transponder to altitude reporting. The squawk code for VFR flying is just 1200. And this is a non-controlled airport. There's no tower or anything, so we don't have to get clearance to take off. But what you would do is get on the radio and announce to the local traffic that's monitoring that you're fixing to take off.
Kilo Charlie X-ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor taking off runway 4 right touch and go.
And you'd look as best you could down on final, make sure there's no incoming aircrafts fixing to land. Look down the runway, make sure it looks clear. Come down here, parking brake off, make sure it's off. There it is. If you were on a short runway, or if you were really taking off from an airport that was really high up, above sea level, like for Denver, for instance, you might drop the flaps 1 notch for takeoff, but we'll just do a flaps up takeoff. And advance the throttle. Again, make sure your altimeter is set, trim is set for takeoff. Kind of keep an eye on final as best you can. And just slowly taxi onto the runway, line up with the center of the runway. And it's a pretty calm day. I don't know if the wind's coming from any particular direction. We got a very slight crosswind coming from the left, but you would turn the yoke or the stick slightly into the wind, not much, just a little bit, and hold it there. As you put the throttle in, you'll get a lot of left turning tendencies between the torque and the P factor. If you don't use your rudder, it'll actually turn to the left quite a bit. The only time it maybe wouldn't do that is if you had a strong crosswind coming from the right, pushing on the rudder back there, the vertical stabilizer. But for these single engine propeller airplanes, you'll have to hold right rudder a little bit to keep it center lined, and you just use it as how much you need to keep it centered. And as you pick up speed, you can let off the bank into the wind, and it's just something you have to get a feel for. When to transition, the controls. Push the throttle in. See how it's going to the left, and I have to use right rudder to keep it straight. About maybe, I don't know, half of the rudder. Bank to the left a little bit. We'll pick up speed. We'll get to about 60 knots, and then we'll rotate. There's 60. Gently pull back on the stick or the yoke. Don't stall it. As you get up in the air, kind of drop the nose just a hair and let it build up speed. And then use your elevator trim to dissipate any control forces on the yoke, so you're not having to hold the yoke back or push the yoke forward. And that's what the trim wheel is for. It controls the elevator trim tab on the back of the airplane to alleviate control pressures. If you push the trim all the way forward, the nose will go down. If you push the trim all the way back, the nose goes up, and you'll have to fight that with the control yoke. And that's really all it's there for, is to relieve control pressures. You don't want to fly the airplane with the trim wheel. You want to use the yoke for pitch, and then once you get the desired pitch, then use the trim wheel to alleviate the control pressures that you're having to push or pull on the yoke to maintain that attitude, whether it's level flight or a climb or descending. And we'll climb up to about 1,000 feet above the field elevation of the runway. Around here, that's around 1,600 or 1,700 feet. Because the field elevation is about 500 to 600 feet above sea level. And so we're not just redlining the engine the whole time. You can go ahead and pull the engine back a little bit after takeoff, after you start getting closer to your altitude, desired altitude. We'll level off at 1,700. Using the rudder, you want to keep this turn coordinator, you want to keep the black ball in the center. If the ball is to the left, you push on the left rudder pedal. If the ball is to the right, you push on the right rudder pedal. And you just use the rudder pedals as needed to keep a coordinated turn. Because if you don't use rudder pedals, the ball will skew left or right, and that's an indicator whether the tail is skidding or not. And in a high-wing airplane, when you bank, you lose visibility in that direction of the turn. So it's always a good idea to look out for traffic first and even raise the wing, get a good field of view, make sure it's clear, and then turn into it. In a low-wing aircraft where the wing is on the bottom of the airplane, it's not quite so important, but you still want to look out where you're going. We're making a really wide traffic pattern here. And we'll pull the throttle back to 2,400 or so, and just keep using the trim wheel up and down. If you have peripherals that have a trim wheel, you can use that. If not, you'll have to assign buttons to trim the nose up or down. And a lot of airplanes have electric trim, so they'll actually have a similar to a hat switch on a joystick, but it's on the yoke, and you pull the trigger back on the top of the yoke, and it'll run an electric motor. See, there's the buttons right there. You can actually see I've got those buttons assigned, and that will control the elevator trim. But in these smaller airplanes, I like to just do it with the trim wheel that's on my flight controls that I have plugged into my Xbox. It just makes it easier. But for faster aircraft, I typically just use the buttons. Jets and stuff, just use the electric trim. But in smaller airplanes, I find it more fun to just use the trim wheel. And in these airports that are uncontrolled, you don't have clearance or anything to land or take off, but it's good to announce where you're at on the in the
Kilo
traffic
Charlie
pattern.
X-ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor is on downwind runway 4.
And downwind is when you're on the outside of the runway going in the opposite direction that you took off from. Then you'll turn base. That's
Kilo Charlie X-ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor is on base runway 4.
that's this leg right here. We'll go ahead and pull throttle. Wait for the speed to come down to get into the wide arc. Once the airspeed gets into the wide arc, then you can lower the first notch of flaps. So we'll do flaps 1. Make sure to trim as needed. And we're pretty close. We'll go ahead and turn final. And announce
Kilo
it.
Charlie X-ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor is on final runway 4 touch and go left traffic.
And after you turn final, you can go ahead and put in the second notch of flaps. Unless it's a really short runway or it's a soft field, you really don't need to use the last notch of flaps in the Cessna, which goes to 30 degrees. 20 degrees will be just fine, which is the second notch. Getting kind of slow on my airspeed. Your approach speed in this airplane is about 70 knots. And you just kind of maintain 70 knots till you get down to the runway. Slowly pull the throttle off. As you're coming in, when you're far out, you'll focus on the beginning of the runway, but as you get closer and closer, you'll transfer your vision from the beginning of the runway down to the end of the runway as you get closer to it. As if you're driving a car on the runway, you look down the road, and that'll really help with your landings, because if you're concentrating on the beginning of the runway, you'll actually slam into it.
Kilo
Or
Charlie X-ray Whiskey Traffic, Cessna November 729er Quebec, 1 mile southeast, 500 feet inbound to land runway 4.
And we could do a touch and go, but I'm just going to do a full stop. Another aircraft coming in there to land on our runway. We'll take this turn here. And make sure you're clear of the runway, and then announce to the local traffic on the Unicom frequency that you're clear of the runway. We'll cross this threshold here and then gently bring it to a stop using both the left and right brake pedals on the top of the rudders.
Kilo Charlie X-ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor is clear of the runway.
And after we're clear of the runway, we'll put the flaps up all the way, reset your trim back for takeoff, transponder to standby, pitot heat off, strobe off, and landing light off. You leave the taxi light on, you leave the nav and beacon on the whole time the engine's running. And either taxi to the ramp to shut down the engine, or get on the radio and announce that you're heading back to the end of the runway for another takeoff.
Kilo Charlie X-ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor is taxiing to runway 4.
Kilo Charlie X-ray Whiskey traffic, Cessna November 062221 miles southeast, 500 feet inbound to land runway 4.
I guess we'll wait for them to come around to final and land. Sometimes the artificial traffic, the AI traffic, sometimes it works properly. Most of the time it doesn't. There are mods and stuff you can download to inject better, more accurate traffic, but most of those are for PC only, and they don't have that option for Xbox. But I'm hoping the new Flight Simulator 2024 that's coming out later this year will natively have better ATC procedures and more realistic voices and everything, and better traffic injection. And more accurate aircrafts flying around. And the reason you want to leave the landing light off is because it can be blinding. It does get pretty bright at nighttime, and everything you would do at night, you do during the day, just to maintain the same routine and practices. So even though it's daytime, broad daylight, we'd still go ahead and use the landing light and taxi light, but we'll go ahead and set the parking brake. We can go ahead and put the transponder back on altitude reporting. The transponder, for those of you that don't know, it's an identifier, so air traffic controller can see you on radar. They will give you a squawk code to punch into the transponder, and they'll be able to track your flight parameters, speed, altitude, heading, much more accurately. But for flying in uncontrolled airspace, flying VFR, visual flight rules, in America you would just squawk 1200. I guess yeah, there they are. Yeah, and sometimes even though you can see the lights, sometimes the aircraft won't animate, and it'll look like a ghost with lights on it flying down the runway. It's just one of the limitations of this simulator, the artificial traffic. Here pretty soon, they should announce final and come into land. Yeah, that should be them. I guess they're just gonna fly around. They're not low enough, and they're not coming into land. Yeah, that kind of stuff kind of breaks the immersion. When the ATC or the artificial traffic doesn't function properly, because part of flying is really knowing how to use the radios and procedures, uh, navigating in and out of an airport using uh, avoiding other aircraft and traffic. But I don't know what they're doing. We'll just go ahead and go. Announce our takeoff.
Kilo Charlie X-ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna November 1311 Victor taking off runway for left touch and go.
Pitot heat, strobe, landing light, parking brake off. Flaps will leave up, transponder to altitude reporting, elevator trim set. Make sure the turn the autopilot off. I guess I accidentally bumped the switch. Well, see, he did land. That's so weird. I guess that's a different airplane. They never announced final, but there they are rolling down the runway. We'll go ahead and line up and wait. Wait for them to pull off the runway, and then we'll go. Yeah, and if you want to make sharp turns, you have to use differential braking as well as the rudder pedals. A lot of times, especially if the nose wheel is a castering nose wheel and doesn't have a direct link to the rudder pedals.
X-ray Whiskey traffic. Cessna November 729er Quebec is clear of the runway.
All right.
Kilo Charlie X-ray Whiskey traffic. Cessna November 729er Quebec is clear of the runway.
All right, they're clear of the runway. All the field elevation is about 300. Okay, so we'll climb to about 1,300 feet. But yeah, whatever the field elevation is, if it's a 500 feet, 300, 2,000 feet, you would just add 1,000 to that, whatever that number is. And you can look up the information about the airport. We'll go ahead and full power, let off the brake, right rudder. You can see me using the right rudder a little bit. Kind of bank into the wind a little bit with the yoke, just slightly. And relieve it as you get faster. Hit 60, rotate at 60. Go ahead and put the yoke back in. use the elevator trim a little bit. We'll do one more circuit and come into land, and I think we'll end the video there after we land. See if I can't make a better traffic pattern. It's also a good idea to align the heading bug, if you have one, with the heading of the runway. We took off for runway 4, so you pretty much want to line it with that. It's a good indicator of your situational awareness. And just keep using that elevator trim. Alright, I think we'll level off about right there. Pull back on the throttle a little bit so we're not redlining the engine. About 23 or 2400 RPM for this aircraft will do. You can even go a little bit slower if you want. Pull it back even more and keep it about 100 knots if you wanted to. We'll go ahead and make left traffic. Use the rudder pedals and stand on the ball there. If the ball's to the left, use left rudder. If the ball's to the right, use right rudder. This is also to account for adverse yaw. As an aircraft yaws left and right, it puts drag on the opposite wing of where you're wanting to turn into. So I'll show you. So I'm going to bank to the left and watch the ball. I'm not going to use rudder to correct it. We're just going to bank. See? And to keep a coordinated turn, if you're banking hard left, you want to use a little bit of left rudder. But the idea is to keep a coordinated turn so you're not skidding or sliding around in the turn. You want to keep it coordinated. And you just use the rudder lightly. Once you're up in the air, it doesn't take much rudder pressure. But as you bank right, you just use a little bit of right rudder and try and keep the ball centered. And then once you're established in the turn, you won't have to use as much rudder pressure to keep a coordinated turn, but you will still have to use a little bit. I have a bad habit of just banking the aircraft without using enough rudder to compensate for the adverse yaw. But and this will be true all the way up into jet aircraft, airliners. You'll want to be using that rudder as you turn. So you'll use the yoke or the stick, you bank into the turn, and use the left or the right rudder pedal, whichever way you're turning. And just use that ball indicator now on it'll have a different type of display for the turn coordination on a glass cockpit type of display on a glass screen. And once we're abeam the numbers, we're just past them, we'll go ahead and ease off the throttle, slow the aircraft down. Kind of let it get into the wide arc here. That's the flap operational speed. and so it's safe to use the flaps. We use flaps 1. Kind of dropped the nose a little bit too much there. And just maintain approach speed of about 70. You can also practice engine off landings, dead stick landings. You'll want to practice. That's something you'll practice in real life over and over and over again. The flight instructor will pull over and pull the throttle back to idle, and he'll say, okay, pick out a spot to land. And around airports for training, we'll go ahead and do another notch of flaps. 2 notches is good for landing on this runway with this aircraft. Pushing the throttle a little bit. And this is about what the picture should look like. The angle, the runway, as you come in. Not all runways will have these little visual lights, VASI or PAPI lights. Red and white means you're pretty much on glide slope. All red means you're too low. All white means you're too high. See, there's too high. Let's see if I can get it to say too low. There's 2 reds. That's telling me I'm a little bit too low, below the glide slope. Make sure you're using the rudder pedals to keep the nose aligned with the runway. And as you get lower to the runway and slow down, you'll want to start to flare. And flaring just simply means pulling back on the stick or the yoke and pitching up, bleeding off speed. But the idea is to get the aircraft to stall right at the moment the wheels touch the ground. When the wheels touch the ground, you want the aircraft to quit flying. Basically stall. And if you do any flight instruction, you'll be doing that with an instructor up high where it's safe to stall the aircraft and practice stalling and get the feeling of what that looks like and feels like in the airplane and practice so you won't do it by accident close to the ground and kill yourself. Or, make a hard landing. We'll do flaps up. I think we'll end the video there. Put the trim back to takeoff, flaps up, transponder back to standby, strobe off, landing light off. Go ahead and announce clear of runway. Should have already done that.
Kilo Charlie X-Ray Whiskey Traffic Cessna, November 1311 Victor, is clear of the runway.
And I guess I'll go ahead and taxi to the apron, to the ramp, and show you how to shut it down. These smaller airplanes are really easy to shut down, nothing to them. You just get parked, set the parking brake, turn the avionics switch off, and pull the mixture, the red handle, all the way back gently and to shut the engine off. That basically starves the engine of fuel. And I guess we'll park right here. Pull up a little bit. That's probably good right there. That's close enough. Yeah. Alright. There, we're stopped. And once we get parked, we'll turn the taxi light off. We'll set the parking brake. Turn the avionics bus off. Sometimes it's one switch, sometimes it's two. But you turn the avionics off. That's so that, and you leave it off when you start the engine as well. That's so you don't mess up any of the delicate electronics in there, any surges when you're shutting the engine off or cranking it up. So avionics off, and then we'll gently pull this dude back until we starve it of fuel. The engine shuts down. Then you come over here. This is very important as well. Turn the mixture, or not the mixture, but the magnetos to off. That makes the engine completely dead. So mixture all the way back, magnetos all the way off, beacon off. You can go ahead and turn the nav off too. And the shut-off valve if you feel like it. And then alternator, and then battery. And that's the aircraft shut down. That's all there is to it. But I might be making more videos like this where I'm actually flying and talking at the same time, showing different things for different airplanes. But anyways, that's the video of I wanted to make of the Cessna 172 and doing a few circuits around the airport. I might make a few more with some more advanced aircraft. Yeah, I think we'll leave the video there, and thanks for watching, and have a great day.